Mariko Tatsumoto, welcome to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation of ours.
It's great to connect, and I'm really excited about the topic you've proposed and come up with and developed some notes about. Um, and I also love the fact that we're kind of neighbors because you're about an hour and 20 minutes, maybe an hour and 30 minutes east of me in Memphis. You're in Pagosa Springs, just down the road on 160. How long have you lived there?
I've been here 29 years.
Wow. Okay, great.
Wow,
Great.
a long time.
Yeah, you've seen some changes in Pagosa Springs then for sure.
Oh boy, that I could go on for a long time on that, but yes, it was just a tiny little nothing town, when I got here, and uh, it was good, some of the development, but it's really getting pretty overwhelming now.
Yeah.
Of course, the housing situation and the prices are out of sight, I mean, just a starter home starting at 700,000 or something. Not what you call affordable anymore.
Yeah. Absolutely beautiful spot in Colorado and terrific views of the mountains and everything. Just fantastic. A quick question before we get to the writing. Do locals go to the hot springs?
Locals?
Yeah.
Yes, I go twice a week. I have a locals annual pass, and they just opened up the new section with, I think, another 50 pools. It can't be that many.
Yeah.
25 pools or something like that. Maybe there's a total of 50 now. Uh,
Yeah.
and they let us have one day where we could go and try it out. And I have to say, I hate to bring more people here, but it is fabulous. Yeah, it is really. I do cold plunges, so they have access to the river, the San Juan River. So I do 4 plunges every time I go there, and
Nice.
it's great. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, I hate to bring more people to you too, but every time I get to go, it's just a real treat. It's so relaxing. So
Well,
relaxing.
you have to let me know when you're going to come do that. I'll meet you there.
Okay, that sounds great. We can talk writing.
Oh, yeah. Our partners will love that, right?
Yeah. Well, before we get to this topic, and I will just lay it out the impact of characters' deaths in fiction, in novels. Before we dive into this, which I thought was really well thought out and planned out, give us just a little background, lawyer turned writer. How long have you been writing? And I'm going to ask a big favor, and that's that you not detail all the awards you've won because otherwise we'll eat up all the time in the podcast running those down.
Oh, well, that's so nice of you. Um, yeah. So I always wanted to write, like a lot of us, from the time we were kids, we wanted to write. Uh, but I did have to earn a living, so I was a lawyer for a while, long while. And then so about 30 years ago, I started taking creative writing classes and stuff like that for fun. Never really thinking that I could do that. I just kept practicing law. And then about 20 years ago, I thought I'd try my hand at it, that kind of thing. And started doing okay, got myself an agent and so on, and now have published 7 books. Almost all of them are historical fiction. I never really meant to go in any one direction, but after the first few books, I looked back and I thought, huh, I think they're all historical fiction. And because I was born and raised in uh, Japan, well, until I was 8, and then the rest of the time I've been here. But so all of my books have something to do with Japan, whether it's set there, Japanese characters, but there's also always a lot of culture and other things involved in my books. And then I've written one nonfiction, which is a craft book called How to Write a Middle Grade Book That Kids Will Love. So I do some editing for people that want to write in that genre, and I speak about that kind of stuff for But my last book is actually a crossover into adult, young adult, and adult. And the book I'm writing now is an adult book. So I'm trying to move up in the age category right now. So
Yeah. And your most recent title is?
Blossoms on a Poisoned Sea.
Give us just a snapshot overview of what that book is about.
Well, that book is another historical fiction. Um, I happen to have that right here.
Perfect.
I don't know if you can see that.
That's
Uh,
perfect. Yep.
okay. So this is a crossover with young adult and adult. It's a historical fiction based on the true events of the world's first mercury poisoning. This is where a fisherman's daughter and an executive's son risk everything to expose a devastating corporate cover-up and fight for justice in the 1950s Japan. This, if I could do one little, marketing on my of this book,
Sure.
it just recently was the honorable mention for the Freeman Book Awards. Most people probably don't know what that is. It's an honor for Asian titles set up by Columbia University in collaboration with 7 other universities. So that happened about a month ago. So I was very
Congrat-
excited about that.
Congratulations. That's excellent award given the prestige level of the universities involved. Very, very good. Um, and that book is set entirely in Japan, or does it?
Yes,
Okay.
it is, and it's all based on true events. So it required like about 2,000 hours of research. Which
Did you go over to Japan?
no, I didn't. I would have liked to, but they've really reclaimed that ocean, the bay portion, so it doesn't look anything like it.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, but I was a lot of research. I, that would take another hour of what I had to do to
Yeah.
figure this out. Yeah.
Yeah. That's terrific. And who's your publisher for that one? Just out of
That
curiosity.
that was Northampton House Press.
Great. Beautiful cover. Yeah, terrific.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and we've got some other titles in your background that will probably come up as we talk about this topic today, is what I hope and assume. And you'll have some examples of the kinds of things that you've done with your story to help engage readers and move them emotionally. But let's dive into this. The narrative impact of characters' death in fiction in novels. And I've got to say, I've never really had a presentation or stopped and really thought about this, thought it through in terms of how writers should approach this. But I think it's as important as anything else in terms of really being strategic and thoughtful about how you approach um, removing a character from your story. Um, so, well, before we dive in, I mean, is this something you've been thinking about for quite a while?
This is again something that I never really thought about intentionally, but almost all my books involve sometimes 1 up to 4 deaths of. We're not just talking about just characters that just appear and come and go, but we're talking about some of the more major characters, and
Right.
I've been doing that with almost all my books. And then uh, when I was talking to you about coming on today, I was thinking about, what could I talk about or something like that. And I was looking for some kind of a thread through what I write uh, that I've never really thought about. I knew that I was writing historical fiction, but then I thought, I was saying to my partner, I kill a lot of characters off. And he said, you kill a lot of characters off. So I said, I think I might talk about that and think about really why and how, because you write a mystery series,
Yep. Yep.
right?
I've written one standalone that's not crime fiction, but
Yeah, the
yeah,
Fireball.
Yeah, the fireballer, but even there, death plays a huge role. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So so you have lots of deaths in,
yeah.
in what you write, and you write them also strategically, right? I mean, you think about the impact on the readers and the impact on the plot. Obviously, that's why you're really putting it in.
Right. And I think in general, crime fiction mysteries are about prosecuting, a wrong, whether, usually it is 99% of the time it's a murder. And whether it's an amateur or professional protagonist, sleuth, going after that, it's about restoring for the reader a sense of justice and a sense of
Right.
return to normal in the landscape of whatever you're writing about.
Yeah. That is just encompasses everything. That is so true, because you have a death, and then you want there's all these injustices throughout a book, and that's what keeps the emotion of the reader all rolled up. So you want that unfairness, but in the very end, you somehow want the reader to come away with, okay, the bad guys got it one way or another. It's they still feel badly about the people that might have died, like murdered or something like that. But you want a sense of closure by the end of these deaths. And so definitely what you write is exactly that.
Right. Well, you talk a little bit about how the writer has to you have to earn this moment. You can't just, it can't be just kind of passed off as casual. You have to make sure it delivers the emotional impact that we want. How do you do that?
So when you have characters die, um, there is significant impact to the narrative, obviously. And so you want to have a clear purpose to avoid alienating the reader. Some readers, they don't do well with deaths. Some people, especially violent deaths, some people will just stop reading or never read your book if they hear that there are a lot of violence in the books. And then, well, some books, that's just part of the plot. And if readers can't handle that, then they probably will not be reading it. But even then, you don't want to go overboard, like in, let's say, Game of Thrones,
The Red
where
Wedding, the Red Wedding.
I think that if you ask people, is there violence in that book, that series, that, and I'll talk more about moving the plot along. And obviously, Game of Thrones is a changing of the throne, so you have to have some killing there. The new king or leader comes on, and all that kind of stuff. But it is pretty violent. And then towards the end, especially, I think some people were wondering if all of that was really necessary. So I think in the kind of books that you and I write, we need death somehow, but we don't want to take it to overboard to a point of offending people too much. So we want to talk about how there's a purpose to these deaths, and thinking about the impact of the reader. So the purpose is, one is to move the plot along, and then to affect the arc of the surviving characters. That is just so much of what this is all about, that the surviving characters are obviously going to be affected greatly. And how do they feel? How do they act? How do they move forward? And so on. So those two are the main things we're going to talk about today. So first of all, the author needs to know the target audience. So if one of them is age group. So if you have a children's book, of course, death is usually not used very often, unless it is a book specifically about how to deal with death and things like that, introducing children to death. And so, of course, that's totally different than what we're talking about. Generally speaking, we don't have much death in those books, but I'll give you some examples. I write in that genre, and I still have plenty of deaths. But I think those are handled in a way that young people can handle it. So violent death, of course, is a little different from just somebody dying because they're old and they die or something like that. So violence may not be appropriate for children's books, cozy mysteries, although cozies always have at least one murder. Certain romances, I think usually don't have a lot of death, but sometimes it's part of the plot. But violence, as you said in your genre, it's practically required. People expect when they pick up a thriller or a spy novel that there's going to be violence, there's going to be multiple deaths, probably.
Yeah.
Murder mysteries and so on. So in those, you have to have them. And even though they're required, like for you, how do you handle that? What are you thinking when you have some violent deaths in your books?
Yeah, I mean that's the question is sort of the how and how much to draw it out, how much to go into detail without being gratuitous, um, and then this sounds like a crazy thing to kind of say, but what has the antagonist, the villain, done to earn what level of death that matches his villainy, his or her villainy?
That is something I haven't thought about too much because I don't really have that. I will talk about in Blossoms on a Poison Sea, but my antagonist is a corporation, you know, so it's a little bit different there. But yes,
It
I
doesn't mean
that is a very interesting point.
a corporation doesn't mean that there aren't people behind it who can't be held responsible, though. And
That's
they are might be the current manifestation of decades long corporate interest in something, but if nonetheless, if they have tolerated that corporation's behaviors that have hurt other people through
mhm,
their negligence or through their deception and maybe lies to the community, for
mhm,
instance, about I mean, I believe we are lied to by corporations all the time about, well, I mean, we know tobacco companies lied about knowing the fact that they knew cigarettes were harmful. We've been lied to by big oil. Personally, I believe that we've been lied to by big oil about the fact that climate change wasn't a thing starting in the 60s and 70s. They tried to brush that off. So corporations lie all the time to protect their profits and interests. And I do believe current executives in charge, if they've been, going along with those lies, should be held accountable.
yes,
Why
they
not? Why not
should.
kill them?
There, yeah, some of that comes up in the book that I'll talk about, uh, um, but all of those are good points. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that kind of insight. So, one of the things that all authors need to do, and what we're trying to do most in our books, of course, is to capture that emotion of our readers, because that's the most important thing, right? So emotion is the reader is the reason that readers keep turning the page, and emotional attachment to the characters is most important. It's beyond, of course, plot is very important, but if there's not that connection between the reader, then you've lost them, and even a great plot is not going to go anywhere. So
The older I get and the more experienced I get in writing, I I co-sign that statement and 100,000%. It is that's key. And then the emotions should drive the plot because what your characters are feeling and what they decide to do should be a direct relationship with how they're
Yes.
feeling. And if the reader has no idea what the characters are feeling, there's really no story.
Yeah. And I think we all know books, movies, whatever, where it's all plot, 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 plot driven. And then, by the time you're done with it, okay, well, that was sort of fun about this and that. But people don't, the readers, once they're done, they're not going to think about the book anymore. They're not going to talk about the book. It was just sort of a fun read, but there's nothing tugging at them anymore. Yeah, so emotion is definitely number one. So as far as using death in plots, oftentimes, and I'm sure you've come across this many times, is you need your plots going like this, and you need some kind of a U-turn, 180 degrees, 90 degrees, that doesn't matter, something that's really going to change your plot, that's unexpected by the reader. So in those, one of the instruments that is so successful, right, Mark, is a death. Killing, a death, it doesn't matter. So that can really set up your plot to go in the direction that you're trying to take it. And so that's one way to use it in a plot. And of course, it also has to be very organic and not so that it's just not believable. And
Right.
sometimes we read those kind of books too.
Yeah. So walk us through some examples.
Okay, so I thought I'd start with my latest book, Poison Blossoms on a Poison Sea. I gave you the sort of a little summary on that is based on mercury poisoning. So what I did in that book is I created two protagonists, Yuki and Kyo. It takes place over a span of 5 years, so they're still young teenagers when they start in the book, and then they move into adulthood as things go on. So Yuki is the girl protagonist, and the book starts off with her uncle dying of this disease. At that time, they don't know it's mercury poisoning yet. So it's very sad to Yuki because the uncle lived with the family, and the way he dies is mercury poisoning is really a bad way to die.
Yeah, I would think so.
Very, very, very painful. It's a awful way. So this is the inciting incident in the book, because this is how it starts, and then it gives Yuki the goal, which obviously is still the goal of the whole book, is to uh, keep the rest of her family from getting this disease. So that's it starts. This book has 4 deaths. So this is death number 1. Death number 2 is Yuki, the girl, again, is assaulted by a man, and her father is killed while defending her honor. By this time, he has contracted the disease and is very disabled, yet he still has pride. He still wants to be the head of the family and wants to protect his daughter. So he goes to try to avenge that. But in what happens is that he ends up dying, and the criminal, you might call it, is still unscathed at that time. So in that, the plot takes a very different path, because now the two protagonists want to avenge the father's death. So they plan out a way to kill this man, but as the scenes unfold, they decide that they're not going to. But through these scenes, the two characters are really, really revealed, and especially with young people, their characters are really developed through this. And so that was death number 3. Death number 2. Death number 3 is this criminal actually does die. I'm not going to say how,
Yeah.
but not by these two protagonists. So in that's what we were talking about, is at least some justice is shown that the way this criminal dies is it's one of the things that I don't think that most readers hooray when my characters die, but I think this is one time where they might think this is okay. I'm glad he died. I'm glad he suffered, or something like that. So then death number 4 is, I'm not going to tell you who that is, but the reason for that death is it reveals all the hidden secrets. It comes later on in the book. So it reveals all the hidden secrets that everyone's been dying to know about. And then, so that gives a way for all of that to be revealed. And the person that dies, the man that dies, as to his character, as to why he had done the things he had done throughout the book. So there's sort of like an unfolding of that character.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So before we get into how to deal with this at the middle grade level, um, I'm going to go way out on a limb, way out on a limb, and I'm going to guess that you are a plotter.
Oh, you're so right. Yes, I am not a pantser. That's not to say that I have many times been writing, and all of a sudden the character says something, and I say, "Oh, what did you just say?"
Yeah,
You know? Or
yeah.
something lends itself to something else, and hey, I just throw away the rest of the book and go with it.
So I was about to ask, have you ever gotten to a point in drafting where your outline says, kill this character, kill the uncle here, or kill the father dies here, and you get right up to that moment and realize, nope, he gets or she gets to live. It's somebody else.
So many times. In
Okay.
my initial draft, the two protagonists, they're plotting out the revenge of the father being killed, and I was actually going to have them kill this man. I
Yeah.
I talked it over with some people, and I said, might not be a good light on these kids. So I rethought the whole thing, and actually the way he dies, I think, is so much better, just so much better, and the justice is meted out the best in that one. Um, yeah, and several times, especially the one I'm writing right now, I get a feedback usually like this: the middle sags, you
Right.
know,
Right.
or I would have stopped reading here, or something like that.
Yeah.
Boy, I better do something about this. And then sometimes I bring in death or something to really spice it up or do something really different.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that happens too often, because then that means, oh, another 300 hours of rewriting or something like that, you know. Yeah,
Yeah.
does that happen to you? Are you a plotter?
Complete, complete pantser. I have no idea where my story is going.
Really? You
Uh,
can do that in that kind of genre?
yeah. I just have a opening scene and a rough idea of what I want to go into, but I have really no idea. I have a loose idea of the antagonist, but sometimes I'll just write and discover what the forces are, who the forces are behind. So
Wow. Huh?
never, if I were to write an outline, I would take as much time as it takes to write a book because I have no idea how to do that. So
Huh. That's just so interesting.
I know brains work in different ways.
That's for sure.
All right, let's look at middle grade. How do you apply these same concepts to a much younger audience?
Yeah. So when I talk about middle grade, a lot of people are confused about the age group for middle grade. It's for kids 8 to 12. And usually you're writing for kids that are on the 12 side, not on the 8 side. So this is one of my books. It's called Ayumi's Violin. In 1959, after her mother's death, 12-year-old Ayumi leaves Japan to find her American father. Facing a resentful half sister and a prejudiced stepmother, her only solace is her music. When deprived of her violin, she takes a daring step to reclaim her identity. It's a tale of resilience and belonging. So this was my very first book that I ever published. So
And I do want to mention one key award, which is a RMFW Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers connection on this one because it won the gold award in the literary contest in the Colorado Gold Contest. So this, for folks right now in the spring of 2025, there's an opening right now to submit your fiction for the Colorado Gold Rush Literary Awards. And before we get back to our topic, did that contest lead to a conversation with an agent or anything that got you published?
yeah, so that was 2008. So a long
Wow.
time, yeah,
Wow.
long time ago. That was in the era. Were you with
Yep.
yeah, back
Yep.
then? Okay. So it was all geared to adult
Right.
fiction back then.
Right. Right.
And it was the first time that they allowed even, young adult or middle grade to be even submit. So it was the
Right.
first. I was 100% sure that nothing was going to come out of it, mainly because fiction writers have never really delved into this genre. And then, as you know, well, in that year, agents took the finalists and then they chose the winner.
Right.
And so the agent that read this did ask for a full manuscript. She was thinking, we were talking back and forth. She was interested in representing me. I had just gone to another writing conference. Should I be naming that? I'm not sure if I should be naming that.
Sure, it's fine. No, we don't discriminate.
Okay. I was at the Aspen Writers Conference.
Oh, not that one. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, I was in Aspen for 16 years and I was on the board way, 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 way back when. Had nothing to do with what happened then.
Yeah.
But they do a summer, back then anyway, they did a summer conference. Really, really, really good. Good one if anyone wants to go. It's a whole 5-day. And you get to take classes depending on you have to send in, submit part of your book and it's juried as to if you can take these classes or not. Anyway, I did a pitch for an agent there. And so she offered me representation before this agent from the contest did. And I
Gotcha.
went with that. But
Gotcha.
yeah,
But
I think it's a great way to,
yeah,
number one, you get great feedback,
right from the
And
judges.
then, yeah. And
Right.
number two is if you can final, then an agent's going to be reading at least part of what you
Yep.
submitted.
Yep. Yep.
I would really recommend that.
Yep. Well, congratulations. And I won't go into it, but Ayumi's violin won a bunch of other great awards too. And just you have to go to Mariko's website and spend half an hour reading the list of awards she's won.
Thank
So,
you.
but let's get back to how this applies to middle grade.
Yes, for a younger audience, the inciting incident in this book starts off with Ayumi, the protagonist, who's 12 years old, her mother dying of cancer. I don't really say cancer, but and it's very sad and all, but there's no violence or anything. The mother just passes away peacefully while Ayumi is holding her hand. And of course, Ayumi is very sad. So the reader doesn't have any connection yet with the mother, but you have a connection developing with the little girl who just lost her mother. And not only that, her father was a American GI, because this is back, right after the World War II. So she's forced to leave her country, the only country she's ever known, to come to the US to live with a father that she's never met. And then, so that, of course, that inciting incident sets the course of the plot. And then the reader, follows her along, and it becomes very, emotionally invested in this little girl. So in this one, we have a death in the very beginning that sort of starts the plot along, and then that forces, everything else to happen, therefore develops the character.
Yeah.
So basically, it's very similar. You want to handle the death a little bit less violent or anything like that, with a little bit more understanding, and how the other characters are going to develop from that and how they're going to act. And then in this case, of course, it shows the resilience of this little girl having to change her whole life.
Yeah. Did you do any research, and this applies to both middle grade and young adult, did you do any research just in the sort of psychology area of how youth of those age groups, how they process death?
I never did. I
Well,
never did.
you just develop a character, and I mean, I think we all have our own memory of how we come to grips as we come of age and understand the world in a more complex way than we do when we're 5 or 6 or 8, and we start to grasp all these concepts about ourselves as animals, as human beings who have births and death, and we understand more about birth and we understand more about death. And so I think we have our own selves to look at. And of course, not everybody's the same. Some, very young people grasp it all very quickly, and others are kind of, you know, just take their time, which is natural.
So I was born in Japan, and then when I was 5, my father left to come to the US as a postdoc program. He was a geochemist, and became sort of famous during his lifetime. But he came over for 3 years to do work like at Caltech and places like that. So, and then when I was 8, I'm the youngest in the family. When I was 8, we came over for a couple years supposedly, but then because we've been separated for so long, and 3 years is pretty, pretty long time when you're 5 years old. And so, but then he kept getting offers from other institutions and places like that, and obviously we never left. But I had some familiarity with separation, even though it wasn't death. I sort of looked back on those times as to how I felt, or my
Yeah.
brother, or stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I sort of took that, and I used to sort of fear the separation again, or since my mother was so instrumental without my dad there for 3 years. And then when we got here, there were just teasing little things about what if your mom just went back to Japan by herself? Those kind of things just sent terror, in me as a child. So I would reflect back on those kind of experiences and think about, um, gee, but I still kept both parents, but what happens if you actually don't have one, and then
Yeah.
you're confronted with another adult that you've never met before? So I sort of, whether or not my experience is everybody else's experience, but I took some of that and sort of put that in my books.
That's great. That's great. All right, we've got to get to the young adult example as well.
Oh, do we have time for that?
We
Okay.
have time. We have to make time.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so this is young adult one. I know it says Gutless, but I changed the name to Swept Away. And I don't have that book because I lent that copy to somebody and has not been returned.
Ah,
So I have to show you my original cover. So in this one, the protagonist is 15. And Kenji is the sole survivor in his family in the 2011 tsunami that killed 18,000 people in Japan. He's weighed down by guilt, even though he couldn't have saved his little sister and his parents. So at this point, already the reader feels, a connection to this boy as far as losing his whole family and feeling guilt, even though he couldn't have done anything to save them. So there's already the emotional impact that I wanted with these deaths. Then Kenji used to live in an idyllic small seaside town where he served. Now orphaned, he's forced to go live with his estranged uncle in Tokyo. The uncle turns out to be Yakuza, which is organized crime.
Sure.
Then the book is off and running.
That, that's
So,
good. Yeah.
so in that one, of course, the inciting incident is the tsunami and everyone getting killed. But it doesn't just start out that way in scene one. So I have an introductory chapter where the family is still alive, they're together, and I show their interaction. I show the love and the connection between the family. So the reader has some already a little bit of an attachment there to that family, and then especially this little girl, his little sister in grade school. So there's that, and so I have some emotional impact there, and that is the inciting incident. And then it certainly changes the trajectory of the plot, where he goes from this rural setting, this idyllic life on the coast, to you can't get any more different than going to Tokyo, huge metropolitan, and then having to live with an uncle that he's never met, who also happens to be a gangster. So all sorts of things happen. I've already pulled in, I hope, the reader by then, and then they're kept in the story with everything that happens with the plot.
I'm getting dual, if not triple, meanings to the phrase swept away.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So that's why I changed the title after that. But
Yeah. Very good. Well, and this has just been great. I mean, in summary, I think the point is, we might accept the fact that we're writing a certain style of fiction, and we might anticipate a death in the story we're writing, but it's as important as anything else that as you plot and as you plan, or if you don't plot and if you don't plan, nonetheless, to think about the role that the death is going to play in your story and how to best take advantage of it and to build it up. Again, like you say, just all about emotion.
well, I hope that other writers think about using death or how they use death. I think a lot of people are avoid that,
Yeah. Yeah.
killing off their characters.
Right.
But I find it really, really useful,
Yeah.
and I'll probably continue to do it.
Absolutely. Well, this has been great. It's been great to get to know you and a few of your books. As we wrap up, we always like to have our guests recommend a reader, recommend a writer that they really admire or, read a lot of or anything like that, or maybe just a book you've read recently you think more people should be reading.
Yeah, so of course, being a writer, I read a lot, and I love a lot of the books I read. And this isn't recent, but probably one of my most favorite book is Boys in the Boat by
Oh,
Daniel Brown. It's a narrative nonfiction, so everything in there is supposed to be true, except for probably some dialogue and stuff like that. But it is just so well done that you'd swear that you were just reading this fascinating novel, and
yeah.
then talk about the emotions in that, right? The young men uh, rowing, and then of course it's the war, and then you have this class distinction between Ivy League kids, and then these desperately, desperately poor kids.
On the West Coast.
Yeah, and so
Right. Yeah.
right, Ivy League is on the East Coast, so you're
Right.
right.
Well, but they were from the West Coast and they go up against these elite rowers from the Ivy Leagues. Then they go on to the Olympics in Germany pre-war. And it's and if you have you seen the movie?
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought the movie did a pretty good job, but the book has just got so much more suspense in it.
they just couldn't put it all in 2 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the book, I just think is just so wonderful. You know, whenever people ask me, you know, if I only had one book to recommend, I just always have to come back to that.
that's great. Excellent. Well, Mariko, thank you so much for this really interesting conversation today. And I'm also going to just mention here at the end, in terms of marketing and plugging, for those who might want to come meet you. I know you may have other appearances, but one opportunity will be this summer at the Mesa Verde Literary Festival, which I'm actively involved in planning and putting together. And we are so excited to have you come over and be one of 48 authors that are going to be here
That's amazing.
for the day. And I know you'll be on a panel and you'll do an individual presentation as well. And I'll put a link here about where folks can find out exactly where you'll be. But we look forward to having you over here for that, and wish you all sorts of success as you continue to write and promote your books.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.